Thank you. It's really a pleasure for me to be here today. I've wanted to come to the Quivira Coalition Conference for many years, and when Courtney called me last summer and asked, Gabe, would you come down to Albuquerque in mid-November and discuss your operation, I thought, gee, now that's a decision I have to make. North Dakota in mid-November, Albuquerque in mid-November. And just to show you, my son Paul is with me today. He took many of the pictures you're going to see in this presentation. This picture was taken Tuesday. So we have had snow, and that's actually one of our herds of cattle out grazing a soil primer. But this is what it can look like in North Dakota. You know, we do have spring and summer, lasts about 6 weeks. 2 years ago, we had snow 9 months out of the year. So it can get a little bit tough up there. And one of the things, when I go out and speak about our operation to different people, they say, but that works in North Dakota. It won't work on my place. Let me tell you, if it works in North Dakota, it'll work about anywhere. I'm gonna talk a bit about the ranch history and how we went from where we were when we bought our operation to where we are now. Now, one thing I'm going to say up front is, and I told Courtney this, I'm extremely blunt in my presentation. So if I offend you, tough, get over it, you know. I'm just going to tell it, it's my opinion, and I'm going to tell it like I see it. So a little bit about the ranch history. The ranch we're on was purchased by my in-laws in 1956. And they farmed it for 35 years, and then my wife and I had the opportunity to buy it in 1991. It was primarily all small grains in the cropping system, and the grazing system was season-long. I'm going to focus mostly today on the cropping system because tomorrow you have Ellen Savory and Jim Howell talking, and 45 minutes isn't enough time to get into all of it, but the principles of soil health, it doesn't matter if you're talking cropping or grazing, it's the same. So when we took over our operation, our organic matter levels on the cropland were between 1.7 and 1.9%. We were in a tillage system, very little diversity, infiltration rates, and NRCS came out and measured these. Jay Fear, our district conservationist, is actually with us here today, so he's making sure that I can't stretch the truth too much, but our infiltration rates were only 1/2 of an inch per hour, which is pretty bad. We're in a 16-inch moisture environment, but of that, only about 9 inches comes as rainfall. The rest is in the form of snow. So that's what it was when we started. And through a series of years and events, I really came to the conclusion that we had accepted a degraded resource. And our resource was degraded. So often today you hear people talking about sustainability. And the first thing I say to them is, why do you want to sustain a degraded resource? We got to move beyond sustainability, and we have to talk about regeneration. That's what we need to do. We could not sustain our own operation, let alone a society of 9 billion people with the type of production model we were using. We had degraded and depleted our natural resources, and by doing that, it leads to foods lacking in nutrient density. And when you have foods lacking in nutrient density, we have human health issues. I don't care if you're talking cancer, ADD, ADHD, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, etc. A lot of these are directly related to the food that we eat. So how do we reverse this degradation? And how do we start regenerating our resources? That's the question I had to ask myself in the mid-90s. And I found the answer was in healthy native rangeland. Paul took this photo in one of our pastures, and we practiced holistic grazing management. My son Paul teaches at the local community college. He teaches range management there. He brought his students out, and in one of our pastures, they counted over 140 different species of plants and forbs, grasses and forbs. That's diversity. We have that in healthy native rangeland. Why don't we have it in our cropland? One of the things that all that diversity does is it produces root exudates. Like Dr. Clapperton said, those root exudates is what feeds that soil life that's beneath us. Diverse rangeland will do that. It'll also produce glomalin, and it'll start forming that structure and those soil particles. And we have to have those, as Dr. Clapperton showed and discussed, in order to have the pore spaces that are essential for that living biology. And it's also essential for water infiltration. This is an actual photo I took June 15th, 2009. I took it out of our, on the deck, off my deck in my front yard. And we had a little bit of a rainfall event. It started raining at about 6:30 in the evening. And in a matter of 5.5 hours, we had 12.2 inches. And we ended up with 13.6 inches in 22 hours. Jay Fear, our district conservationist, came out and took these photos right after the rain had stopped. You don't see much erosion. We did lose some of the residue on top, but the amazing thing was the first 8 inches infiltrated into that soil profile. Then it started moving over top. When Jay stuck a spade in the ground, this is what he found. We expected to find mush, but if you have those soil aggregates in those pore spaces in a healthy soil, you can infiltrate that water, and that water will move throughout the soil profile. Right across the road from my place, I have a neighbor who's a conventional farmer. He had water sitting on his fields for over 3 months from that rainfall event. I come to the conclusion I needed to do. I needed to farm and ranch in nature's image. I needed to work with nature instead of against her. Think of the conventional agricultural practices used today. All it is man trying to impose his will on nature. It's not going to work. Nature will win every time. So we had to change our production model. So in 1993, we went 100% no-till. We have done zero tillage since 1993. We realized we had to keep armor on the soil surface. We had to protect that home for all that soil biology. Today, we've gone from primarily a small grain cropping system to a very diverse cropping system with all 4 crop types: warm and cool season broadleaves and grasses. And I ask that you notice on this picture, don't pay so much attention to the crops that I grow, just pay attention to the thought process and what's happening. None of those crops there shown are in a monoculture. For instance, the cool season grass, that's oats with red clover growing beneath it. The warm season grass, that's corn with hairy vetch growing in with it. The warm season broadleaf is sunflowers, and in there is, there's actually flax and a brassica growing in there. Think of what you need, what Dr. Clapperton said, to feed that soil life. You need a diverse diet. Just like we need a diverse diet, soil biology needs that diversity also. The other thing is, and I made this headline before we decided last night to change it to soil primer, but we realized that just growing the diverse crops was not enough. We needed to actually speed up biological time. And the way for us to do that was by growing cover crops. The Burleigh County Soil Conservation District, the county where I live, we do some work with trying some of these different things on the land in order that we can see what happens. The photos I'm going to show you here were taken by Jay Fear in 2006. 2006 was an extremely dry year in our county. We had an open winter. By that means not much snowfall, which is a big part of our moisture. We seeded these cover crop species in monocultures, and then we mixed them all together and seeded a polyculture. Well, we seeded them in mid-May, and when we took these photos on July 31st, we had only received a little over an inch of rain on them, and they were pretty much seeded into dry soil. You ever have one of those aha moments? This is one for a lot of us that really drove home the importance of diversity. This is turnips. Right next to it was oilseed radish. You know, and when I say right next, these are just probably a tenth of an acre each, so they are right adjacent to each other. Now look at the cover crop mix directly adjacent to it. Dr. Clapperton mentioned that in a drought, why is it that you see green grass under a tree? Because of that tree's roots bringing up moisture. We found the same thing was happening when we go to these diverse mixes. It's a beneficial relationship they have. Look at the production. They clipped and weighed this. Look at the monocultures, then look down at the bottom. We over tripled dry matter forage production in a drought by planting more species. Why do we want to grow monocultures? This is just a partial list of some of the cover crops Paul and I grew on our operation this year. Don't pay attention to what I grow, just pay attention that there's all 4 crop types. Warm and cool season, broadleaves and grasses. We're not growing all of these together, it's whatever that particular piece of ground needs in order for us to prime that soil life. This is one of our cool season primers. I came to the realization after a number of years that I couldn't just use a cover crop following a cash crop. We needed to be growing them together, or we needed to take full years and make them a soil primer year. In other words, plant these cover crops and let them grow over the entire length of our growing season, which in North Dakota is not very long. But Dr. Clapperton was exactly right. When you start getting soil health, your soil healthier, your growing season will actually extend. It's not uncommon for us to keep crops growing up till this time of the year when we get our first major snowfall event. But this is a cool season cover crop mix. There's about 10 species in there, primarily oats, peas, hairy vetch, and some brassicas. The important thing is it's balanced for the whole. This will feed not only our livestock a balanced ration, but it'll feed that soil biology a balanced ration also. The other thing is you go back and you look at healthy native rangeland. What else did healthy native rangeland have before man came on it? It had very diverse species mix. You know, I come from the northern plains. Northern plains, it was bison. But there was also herds of elk, there was rabbits, you had the predators on there. And you also had insects. And so often we don't pay enough attention to those insects. One of the largest in number and in consumption, as far as the amount it consumes, herbivores there is in the northern plains is grasshoppers. And we need to look at that as an important piece of the whole. The other thing is these are pictures from our operation. There's many different species and types of animals on there. And they all play a purpose. So on our operation, we moved from that season-long grazing. We tried to reflect nature and imitate as best we could. Since the bison were no longer around, we brought in livestock. And we utilized the livestock. Now, my son came back to the operation after college, and I had one request of him. The one thing is he had to think holistically outside the box, and he had to push me to a new level. And one of the first things he did is said, Dad, you've got a diverse mix of crop species between your cash crops and your cover crops, but we need to diversify our livestock operation also. And I said, good point, Paul. So we got into poultry. This is Paul's, some of his pastured poultry. He produces eggs, also produces broilers, has ducks, has turkeys, and they're not all out on the land now too. We're trying to imitate Mother Nature. Also another thing he brought on was sheep. And sheep tend, as you know, to consume a different diet than do cattle. So we've integrated them into the operation now also. Livestock on our operation are simply a tool to convert energy into dollars. Too many people treat their livestock like pets. Our livestock won't get a bed and breakfast, as you saw by the picture. You know, we are in North Dakota, so we do have to feed some hay, but we feed it out on the land, and we only do it for a short time. Cattle have legs, make them use it. This is a picture of that cool season primer before we grazed it. After we move those cattle on, high stock densities, short duration, compaction is a function of time. Our cattle are only on a particular piece of ground a matter of hours. For this cover crop here, Paul was moving them 5 to 6 times a day. So the cattle are moved, they're only on it a short amount of time. When they leave, that's the litter we want left. We want that armor on the soil surface. And we do not. You have living biology beneath you. It has to eat at all times. That land does not sit idle. We try never to miss an opportunity of having a living root in the ground. So immediately after those cattle are done grazing, we're on there seeding the next primer. What we did in this particular case, after we came off with the cool season mix, we then seeded a biennial mix. This is winter triticale, hairy vetch, sweet clover, and radish in there, and then the next spring we will graze that. We'll use high stock densities, short duration, and there's actually such a thing as bat latches, which are automatic gate timers. Paul sets up the fences, takes him about an hour in the morning to take down and set up that day's rotation, and with the automatic timers the cattle move themselves, so it really doesn't take much time at all. And there they're just moving into a new break. And when they're done, that's what's on the surface. We purposely waited until this was at a higher carbon state before we grazed that. And we did that because on our operation, one of the things that is becoming a real challenge now is this soil life is consuming so much that we have to produce higher carbon. And Dr. Clapperton mentioned that when she said that the 20 or 30 to 1 carbon-nitrogen ratio, we probably have to get up near 50 to 1 because we can have this much litter on the soil surface, and in a matter of 2 months, that soil life will have consumed it, and we'll have bare soil. And that's something we never, ever want to see, is bare soil. So carbon really is a missing link in the equation. What we do then, after the cattle graze that off that winter triticale vetch combination, we'll go right in there and seed another soil primer or cover crop. And this is what it looks like. And I always get a lot of questions, but Gabe, how does it work? You know, there's all those different seed sizes. How does it work in nature? You just put it in the drill, set the drill so you get it all in the ground, and away you go. We're not in a wet enough environment where we can broadcast it. That does work in wetter environments. We tend to need to place it in the soil in order to get it to germinate. But that's what it'll look like a couple months later. Think of what Dr. Clapperton talked about, feeding that soil biology, those root exudates, all those plants send off a different signal to feed that underground mass that there is. So you need this type of diversity. And we're feeding the whole. In all of our mixes now, we started putting flowers. We want insects. We want a very diverse mix. You have to think, we're not only feeding the livestock above ground, we're feeding the livestock below ground also. That's a picture of Phacelia with a native pollinator. There's a bee actually feeding on there. Extremely important to have. Some of the pictures Paul took here of some of the insects on our operation. I can't stress enough the importance of that. I'm going to go off track here a little bit and talk about the importance of these predator insects. Dr. Jonathan Lundgren, who's an entomologist at ARS in Brookings, South Dakota, he did a study a few years back at Dr. Dwayne Beck at the Dakota Lakes Research Farm down by Pierce, South Dakota. Dr. Beck has a field of 23 years corn on corn, non-GMO corn, 23 years. Dr. Lundgren went out there and he hand-placed 1,000 corn rootworm larvae per foot. Okay? Came back later in the summer. You would expect that corn would be decimated because Dr. Beck does not use any insecticides on there. So, and it's a non-GMO, like I said, you'd expect total decimation. He dug up those corn roots, less than 1% damage. So where did the protection come from? What happened to that corn rootworm larvae? He set out his traps, his insect traps, came back, counted the insects, he extrapolated it out. Dr. Beck had over 1 billion predator insects per acre because of the cover crops he had. That's the missing link. That's why on our operation, we quit using insecticides dozen-plus years ago. We use no pesticides, no fungicides. Those type of pests are just not a problem because we provided the home for the predators to take care of them. You always want some of those pests there because you need to feed the predators also. But it's all about a balance. This is what we do then with that warm season mix that I showed the picture of. We do not believe that cattle have gizzards. They were not meant to eat grain. They're meant to eat forage. So we actually finish our cattle all on forage. This is a set of steers that was grazing that warm season mix. The beautiful thing about these mixes is you can fit them into a time that your forage quality, your native forage quality and pasture quality may be lacking in the nutrition needed to finish those cattle. So that's where when we bring them on these mixes at that time. You can really use it. It's not only feeding the soil, we're feeding the livestock also. What I like to say is we only allow our livestock to take about 1/3 at the most. 1/3 of the above ground biomass for the cattle, 2/3 for the critters below the ground, and as protection on the soil surface. Now, how does that equate for us in production agriculture in a monetary standpoint? I know you can't read this from back there. This is just your typical N, P, and K soil test. It's a waste of time, and I'll show you why. If you read the fine print, this was taken off that field there where my foot showed the litter on the soil surface where those cattle had grazed. It shows I only have 10 units of nitrogen available in the top 2 feet. Now I'm going to follow that cover crop with corn. How much corn can you grow on 10 units of N? Everybody will say not much. This is us planting then the next spring into that residue. When you look at this photo on your left, that's already planted. We do not want soil disturbance at all. So that's planted right into that residue where the livestock had grazed the previous fall. This is what it looks like in the summer. We use no synthetic fertilizers whatsoever. Very little of our land do we broadcast any manure on, except for what the cattle did naturally. And not all of our acres are we able to run livestock on because part of our operation's in city limits. But this is what that plant looked like, that corn crop with no fertility, no pesticides, no fungicides. This is a leaf tissue analysis taken by Ward Labs at tasseling. Every single nutrient they tested for was sufficient or high category. So where's those nutrients coming from? That soil test showed I only had 10 units of N. But everything here, these plants are healthy. Nitrogen isn't deficient. It's coming from below ground. We want to take care of the energy crisis in this world. We got to get rid of these synthetic inputs, fertilizer uses. There's no reason to have them if we focus on the life in the soil. That particular corn crop there ended up averaging 135. Our county average is about 100. The soil's alive, folks, just like Dr. Clapperton said. We have to, instead of focusing on the plant, we have to focus on the life in the soil. This is the PLFA test that Dr. Clapperton developed, phospholipid fatty acids, and if you have any questions about this, you'll have to ask her because I don't have the foggiest. All I know is she says it's extremely high for the number of bacteria, protozoa, fungi, etc. So I take that as a good thing. This is a test that Dr. Haney did, and there's actually 2 tests here. The red is a field. These two fields are separated just by a single row of trees. The field that the red bars has actually been no-tilled since 1983. It's been pretty much in the same crop rotation with cover crops The difference is the lime green had the livestock grazing on them for 2 years. Now, that goes to show what it's showing here. You'll notice nitrogen on the left is about the same, but look at the increase. The next 2 bars on your left is inorganic phosphorus and then potassium. Look at the increase. We're taking raw parent material and converting it into usable forms for the plants by the root exudates and the soil biology. I hear so often, Gabe, your system's going to crash because you're not putting on phosphorus or potassium. No, it isn't. When am I going to use up all that parent material? I mean, it'll be millions and millions of years. You know, it isn't going to happen. So it's absolute fallacy when academia tells me that, and tells producers, you got to put on all this synthetic fertilizers. No, you don't. Not if you have a healthy functioning soil ecosystem. It'll take care of the nutrients you need. Paul took this picture, and this is my all-time favorite picture. He was out moving our cattle one day. That's the neighbor behind us. Which would you rather put on for fertility? Which is going to use less fossil fuel? Which is going to put more dollars in the producer's pocket? That's an absolutely amazing photograph, and I'm really glad he was there at that time to take that. One of the only ways I can get through to producers the meaning of this is to put up my actual income and expenses. So in this particular case, this was our corn from last year, and county average is 100. Last year we averaged 159, and there's all of our expenses, and it comes down to our cost to produce a bushel and market a bushel of corn, excluding land costs, because I left land costs out so we could make it comparable for anyone in the United States, was $1.10 per bushel. Average cost in the United States, excluding land costs, is well over $4 a bushel. If you add land cost into ours, it's $1.22 per bushel. You add land cost in nationwide average, you're over $5.50 per bushel. Feeding 9 billion people will not be any problem whatsoever if we change our production model and focus on the soil. I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the experiments. I'm fortunate to have Jay Fear as our DC because he pushes my thinking, and maybe I do a little bit to him. This here is our no-till potatoes in the middle. What we do there is we actually just go out and take, and I'm no-till, so I can't dig potatoes. It's just against every fiber of my being. So we lay the potato and onion sets right on the soil surface, unroll a round bale of hay right over them. The rest of that field, I got thinking, that field was designated to be a soil primer this year. Well, one thing about me, I'm really lazy, and I'll admit it. So my wife wants a garden. Well, why don't I just use those garden species as a primer also? So we mixed our garden species, we mixed our 20 species, other species of cover crops, and we mixed over 30 species of annual flowers all together, put them in the drill, and seeded around the potatoes. So there's a 20-acre garden with over 70 species in it. There's our potatoes. About 90 days later, you just peel back that hay. Now, we had a dry year. We were below normal precip, not as dry as many areas in the United States. But we don't, obviously, with a garden that size, you don't water it. So it's whatever fell from the sky. But the important thing is when you have health in your soil, you can produce crops like this without inputs and without a lot of moisture. And there's what the garden looked like. This was taken in September. We had over 20 acres here. We took what we needed for our family, and all the rest was donated to food pantries and people in need. And Paul is in the process now of figuring out how many tons of produce we got off it. It's absolutely phenomenal. It was over 20,000 pounds of zucchini and squash alone, but people at church kept their windows up because we were getting rid of zucchini, That's just what it looks like, though. It was a really fun project to do, and we're going to continue doing it. But look at the amount of produce. And the thing I want to get across to you is so much time we spend, you can't have this species next to that species. It doesn't matter when you have healthy soil. Some of them won't thrive, but others will get next to the species they want, and they'll thrive. Isn't that the way it happens in nature, with the natural seed being sown? And then what we do with the garden, we got to bring the livestock in. So then the cattle came on there, and also all the poultry, the ducks, the turkeys, they all were on that garden also. And that particular field will be ready for whatever crop we decide to put in there next year. Put this together, though, kind of as a land management consequences. And I know it's probably hard to see, but what we wanted to show is the first thing we had to eliminate was tillage. There's no place in production agriculture for tillage because you're destroying the home of all that soil biology. So we got to get away from tillage. The next thing is you have to go no-till, which we did. Then we diversified the cropping system, all 4 crop types. Drive across the United States. You know, once you get just east of here, it's all corn and beans. And it's that way all the way up into Canada. You see a little bit of wheat, corn and beans. That's not diversity, folks. So then you had to add no-till, diverse cropping system, and the cover crops, or the soil primer. And then I think if we really want to mimic nature and regenerate our lands, then we got to integrate the livestock. And I'm not talking just one species. It's livestock, insects, all species. Then we can get to regeneration, we can get to sequestering carbon, and we can get back to supplying healthy foods. That's the results on our operation of managing holistically. We average approximately 30% higher than the conventional farmers do in the county. We have much more pounds of saleable product. Our product is much more nutrient dense. We have a higher quality of life. I told you, I'm lazy. It is so much fun farming and ranching this way. My only regret is I'm not going to, I can't live another 100 years in order to see what level Paul's going to take it to next. We're storing a lot more carbon. Our profits are much higher. And most importantly, we're regenerating the resource for future generations. When we have healthy soil, Dr. Clapperton had a similar side. We have cleaner water, we have cleaner air, healthy plants, healthy animals, and healthy people. It's all intertwined to the health of the soil. And that's what it starts with. It's all about soil health. I want to leave you with this quote, because Sir Albert Howard said this, and I really truly believe this. The first duty of an agriculturist must always be to understand that he is a part of nature and cannot escape from his environment. With that, there's my contact information. Feel free to contact me at any time. It was a real pleasure visiting with you today. Thank you.
Hi, Gabe.
Hello, Kurt.
I tell people about no-till all the time, and the first response is always, oh, but you've got to use herbicides if you no-till. How can you respond to that?
And I want to make this, better step apart here. I want to make this clear. I am not organic at this point, but my goal is to be organic. We are down to about 1 herbicide pass every 2 to 3 years. Now, I'm working with some people who are coming the other direction. Our goal should be to get to organic no-till. That should be our goal. There's organic producers who are now only using 1 tillage pass every 2 to 3 years. We're going to meet in the middle. How I get around that is by these soil primers. We're growing these covers and getting them on the soil. When you have that type of residue on the soil surface, weeds just aren't an issue. So I'm getting there. I'm not there yet. But I tell you what, if I was somebody like Gail Fuller in Emporia, Kansas, I know I could be there already. So Gail, step up, I tease Gail a lot. He pushes me. He's working on the exact same thing I am. But that's how we got to get there. We got to keep that residue on the soil surface and keep it from weeds from germinating.
And I concur with that. It's all about outcompeting the weeds, taking advantage of them. And I'll add another thing to that too, is that if you are having a problem with, let's say, a winter annual weed or winter biennial, then use a warm season crop. Take the weeds out of the comfort zone. Don't be letting them have their comfort zone. Get them away from their comfort zone.
If weeds are germinating, it's just telling us something's out of sync. And it's trying to keep the soil covered. So as long as we have something growing on there, hands down the way to go to get around that, I think, is Colin Seise's system. I was over in Australia and on Colin's place. It's absolutely amazing. I'm having a little bit of a tougher issue in North Dakota because the difference between cool season and warm season in North Dakota is about a week. You know, we just don't, it's all together in a short time. But listen to Colin's presentation this afternoon because that is an easy way with permanent cover to get to organic no-till.
Thank you both for inspiring presentations. Gabe, do your neighbors think that you're crazy?
Ask Jay that. Jay?
Why do they think you're crazy?
Because I am.
I'm serious, you're changing the culture in agriculture, and I'm wondering,
Well,
what's the resistance?
you know, when I first started researching and looking back, to me, all I had to do was go back to Thomas Jefferson's old journals. He was doing this back 250 years ago. You know, I'm not changing things, I'm just coming full circle. So I tell people I'm just 250 years slow. No, that's all. Next question.
I had a question regarding what advice you would give for a family farm that's starting on a small scale for next season. What kind of equipment do you think would be essential to starting a system like this?
Boy, that's a good question. As little as possible. We try and tie up as few dollars as possible in iron because we don't want it depreciating. So a small piece of no-till equipment, and whether that just be doing it by hand, you can do it by hand. But the seeding implement, a no-till seeding implement would be the first thing.
And you can get some, there are some really nice ones for vineyards that are only 4 rows that work really well for small scale. We use them between like rows of vineyards. I use them in horse pastures, you know, 5 acres, 4 rows, perfect.
And would if you don't have livestock to help to break that thing over, would you need a roller of some type, or is there?
You can roll, you can mow. Mowing works fine too. You know?
It's very easy to make a small roller. In Australia, I saw one where they just took a metal pipe, put tires, slid tires over it, and pulled that along. And the tires just rolled it, you know, down level. So it's very easy to come up with something inexpensive to roll it. You know, we do on our operation have, like I said, a number of acres where we can't run livestock. We've come to the realization we'll still be able to build soil health. It just won't be quite the quality of soil health as where we can run livestock.
Okay, I have another question for Mr. Brown, but I'm wondering about your poultry. Do they just run amok, or do you have to?
Yeah.
I know it's really hard to keep track of your poultry, and with the amount of predators you have, how do you handle that?
Yeah, there's a little door on the side that with a photosensitive device on it, so that door raises and lowers whether the sun's up or not. I come out one day this last spring and there was Mr. Coyote waiting for breakfast. He was just waiting for that door to come up. So we do actually allow the predators to take some of the livestock. It really has not been that much of a problem. We may, as we move further into the poultry, may have to get some guard dogs. That's the next thing. Because we do have quite a coyote population, but we calve out on grass, when nature intended, mid-May and June, and to our knowledge, we've never lost a calf to coyotes. They're there. If one dies for some reason, they're going to clean it up, but it's just not an issue.
And then do you buy chicks from a hatchery, or do you let the chickens just...
Yeah, at this point in time, they're purchased as day-olds.
Oh,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, on the other side.
Yes, I'm from California, and one of the things that we hear out there when people talk about no-till is, well, that works in the Midwest, but it doesn't really work out here in the West. And just in a larger sense, that given the regional differences between agriculture in the West, in the arid West, and agriculture in the high plains or whatever. Could either or both of you address some of these differences? I mean, is there any basis for those statements? I already see Gabe shaking his head.
Well, do you have soil?
Well, yeah,
It's as easy as that.
People raise issues in terms of soil moisture and various other things.
Those things are always, I mean, everybody, it really is there's always a reason why you can't change, okay? There's always a reason. We can rationalize all of that. Really, soil processes, okay, the animals that make the processes or the animals that are in the soil may differ, but the process of what they do in the soil is exactly the same no matter where I've been in the world. We have different earthworm species, we have different mite species, we have different polembolin species, but they're all doing the same thing. And so I don't care where you go, if you have soil and you may have different things performing the functions, but it's still functioning. And it's about making it function better. And, they said, well, I have too much moisture. Well then, look, Gabe showed you what happened with the rainstorm. Then you need no-till. If you are really dry, my gosh, why are you tilling? Because then you're drying it out even more. So that's where, no-tillage was really born on the prairies, and the dry prairies, when we had to conserve moisture. And soil organic matter is such a sponge to hold to hold the soil moisture. You can't afford not to do no-till, especially on the dry prairie. And if you're in a really wet area, you can't afford it because you need to have everything draining so that you don't have inundation and you don't end up with anaerobic conditions that are just, wasteful and causing climate change.
Dr. Clapperton showed the pictures of David Brandt in Ohio. David gets over 60 inches of moisture a year. I get 16. A friend of mine, Dirk O'Connor in southeastern Montana, gets 9. Yeah. The best advice, some of the best advice I was ever given, when I bought my first no-till drill, the gentleman who encouraged me to go no-till told me, Gabe, the first thing before you buy a drill, sell all your tillage equipment. And I did that. I sold all my tillage equipment. Then I was committed. I had no way to go back because I wasn't going to go buy tillage equipment. I didn't have the money. So you just do it, and you learn. And I had to learn a lot of things the hard way.
Yeah,
But
Joe Fuller, who we've been talking about, when we had our cover crop, we were going to change the soil primer workshop, he gave everybody, he put a match, and we were in Kansas and it was dry as a bone, and he put a match in front of everybody and said, okay, folks, this is for your box. So in bad conditions, when you think you're going to jump back into the tillage box, burn it before you can get in. And it's the same thing. When times get tough, we want to take a step back to where we were into our comfort zone. Step forward and be bold. Really just step forward and be bold.
One more question.
Just an observation. You two need to coordinate and go on the road with this show. You're really good at it. But then the next question, there really was a serious question. Has anybody looked into yet, assuming that what you guys are talking about, healthy dirt makes really much healthier food?
he wasn't listening. Soil.
All right. But I wonder if by creating healthier food, it doesn't take as much of it to keep people healthy and you don't need as much food. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
That's right.